In a groundbreaking move, Russia has announced the cancellation of $20 billion in debt owed by African nations, a decision that could reshape the continent's economic landscape. This unprecedented gesture not only alleviates financial burdens, but also redirects resources toward vital development projects, as BRICS nations step into a more prominent role. The implications for traditional financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank are profound. Will this mark the dawn of a new financial order? Let's dive in. Chapter 1: Introduction to the Debt Write-Off. The recent announcement of a $20 billion debt write-off by Russia for African nations marks a significant turning point in international finance. This decision is not merely an act of goodwill. It reflects a strategic shift in how emerging economies are addressing long-standing financial burdens. By alleviating this debt, Russia aims to foster stronger ties with African countries, enhancing economic cooperation and paving the way for future investments. This move is particularly noteworthy as it challenges the dominance of traditional financial institutions, positioning BRICS as a viable alternative. The implications of this debt relief extend beyond immediate economic relief, potentially reshaping the geopolitical landscape and redefining relationships between creditor and debtor nations. As African nations regain financial flexibility, they can redirect resources toward critical infrastructure and social programs, which may lead to sustainable development and growth. This write-off not only highlights the changing dynamics of global finance, but also raises questions about the future role of established entities like the IMF and World Bank in managing international debt crises. Chapter 2: Economic Implications for African Nations. The cancellation of $20 billion in debt presents substantial economic opportunities for African nations. With this financial burden lifted, countries can redirect funds previously allocated for debt servicing towards essential sectors such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure development. This shift can catalyze economic growth by enabling governments to invest in projects that enhance productivity and improve living standards. Moreover, the write-off can bolster investor confidence, attracting foreign direct investment as countries demonstrate improved fiscal health. Enhanced economic stability may also lead to increased trade opportunities within the continent and beyond, fostering regional integration. However, it is crucial for these nations to implement sound fiscal policies and governance structures to ensure that newfound resources are utilized effectively. Failure to do so could result in a cycle of dependency on external aid or loans in the future. Chapter 3: BRICS: Redefining Global Financial Dynamics. The BRICS alliance, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is increasingly positioning itself as a counterweight to Western-dominated financial systems. The recent debt write-off serves as a critical example of how BRICS is redefining global financial dynamics by prioritizing cooperation over competition. Unlike traditional institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, which often impose stringent conditions on loans, BRICS emphasizes mutual benefit and respect for sovereignty in its dealings with developing nations. This approach resonates with many African countries seeking alternatives to Western influence. By providing debt relief, BRICS not only strengthens its geopolitical foothold, but also enhances its credibility as a leader in promoting economic development. Furthermore, this shift could inspire other emerging economies to collaborate more closely, fostering a multipolar world where power is distributed more evenly among nations rather than concentrated in a few Western powers. As BRICS continues to expand its influence through initiatives like infrastructure financing and trade agreements, it may fundamentally alter the landscape of global economics. Chapter 4: Historical Context of Debt in Africa. Understanding the current debt write-off requires examining the historical context of debt in Africa. For decades, many African nations have grappled with unsustainable debt levels due to a combination of factors, including poor governance, economic mismanagement, and external shocks such as commodity price fluctuations. The burden of servicing these debts has often stifled growth and diverted funds from critical public services. Previous initiatives aimed at debt relief, such as the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, launched by the IMF and World Bank in the late 1990s, provided some respite but were often criticized for their conditionalities that limited national sovereignty. The recent write-off by Russia represents a departure from these traditional models, offering a more flexible approach that acknowledges the unique challenges faced by African nations. This historical perspective underscores the importance of sustainable financial practices moving forward. Without them, there is a risk that countries could fall back into cycles of indebtedness. Chapter 5. Geopolitical consequences of the write-off. The decision to cancel $20 billion in African debt carries significant geopolitical consequences that extend beyond mere economics. By taking this step, Russia enhances its standing among African nations while simultaneously challenging Western influence on the continent. This move may encourage other countries within BRICS to adopt similar strategies, fostering a collective approach towards addressing Africa's financial challenges. Additionally, it could prompt Western nations to reconsider their engagement strategies with Africa, potentially leading to shifts in foreign policy aimed at countering growing Russian and Chinese influence. The write-off also raises questions about future collaborations between African governments and non-Western partners, as these nations explore new avenues for investment and support. They may prioritize relationships that offer less conditionality than traditional Western models provide. In essence, this debt relief initiative not only alleviates immediate financial pressures, but also reconfigures alliances within international relations, potentially leading to a more multipolar world where diverse partnerships flourish, based on shared interests rather than historical legacies. Chapter 6. Russia and China's expanding influence in Africa. The influence of Russia and China in Africa has grown significantly, reshaping the continent's geopolitical landscape. Both nations are leveraging their unique strategies to establish a foothold in various African countries, driven by a desire for natural resources, economic partnerships, and political alliances. China's Belt and Road Initiative has led to substantial investments in infrastructure projects across Africa, enhancing connectivity through railways, roads, and ports. This strategy not only facilitates trade, but also positions China as a primary partner for many African nations seeking development without stringent conditions. Conversely, Russia employs a more militarized approach, utilizing private military contractors like the Wagner Group to secure influence in conflict zones and resource-rich areas. This dual strategy allows Russia to project power while simultaneously engaging in lucrative resource extraction agreements. However, this growing presence raises concerns about the potential for debt traps and environmental degradation associated with Chinese projects, as well as human rights abuses linked to Russian operations. Chapter 7. Comparison with traditional financial institutions. The approach of BRICS, particularly Russia and China, starkly contrasts with that of traditional financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank. While Western institutions often impose strict conditionalities on loans, such as governance reforms and fiscal austerity measures, BRICS promotes a model based on mutual benefit and respect for national sovereignty. This difference is particularly appealing to many African nations that have historically faced challenges under Western-led frameworks. For instance, Chinese financing is characterized by its no-strings-attached philosophy, allowing countries to pursue development projects without the political conditions typically associated with Western aid. In contrast, Russia's financial engagements often come with military support or political backing, further complicating the dynamics of international finance. This divergence offers African nations a broader spectrum of options for financing their development needs. However, the lack of oversight associated with BRICS financing raises concerns about sustainability and accountability. Chapter 8. Future prospects for BRICS-Africa relations. The future of BRICS-Africa relations appears promising as both sides seek to deepen their partnerships amid shifting global dynamics. with Russia's recent debt write-off for African nations signaling a commitment to economic cooperation. There is potential for increased investment in critical sectors such as infrastructure, technology, and agriculture, as African countries pursue sustainable development goals. BRICS can play a pivotal role by providing necessary resources without imposing restrictive conditions. Furthermore, as African nations seek to diversify their economic partnerships beyond traditional Western allies, BRICS offers an attractive alternative that prioritizes mutual respect and shared growth objectives. The ongoing geopolitical competition between major powers also presents opportunities for BRICS nations to solidify their influence in Africa by addressing local challenges collaboratively. However, the success of these relations will depend on how effectively both sides manage expectations and navigate potential conflicts of interest. Chapter 9: Challenges and Risks Ahead. While the expanding influence of Russia and China in Africa presents numerous opportunities, it also brings significant challenges and risks that must be addressed. One major concern is the potential for debt dependency, particularly with China's aggressive lending practices tied to infrastructure projects. Many African nations could find themselves trapped in a cycle of borrowing that jeopardizes their financial sovereignty if they fail to meet repayment obligations. Furthermore, the environmental impact of large-scale projects financed by these countries raises alarms about sustainability. Inadequate regulations may lead to ecological degradation that disproportionately affects local communities. Additionally, Russia's involvement through military contractors like the Wagner Group poses risks related to human rights abuses and increased militarization of governance in fragile states. The presence of these mercenaries can exacerbate conflicts rather than resolve them, undermining peace efforts across the continent. As African countries navigate these complexities, they must adopt strategies that prioritize transparency, accountability, and community engagement to mitigate risks while maximizing the benefits of foreign partnerships. Chapter 10: A Turning Point for Global Finance. The recent developments surrounding BRICS' engagement with African nations signify a potential turning point for global finance. The $20 billion debt write-off by Russia exemplifies a shift towards more equitable financial relationships that prioritize development over conditionality. This emerging paradigm challenges the long-standing dominance of Western institutions like the IMF and World Bank, which have often been criticized for imposing restrictive measures on borrowing countries. As BRICS expands its influence through strategic partnerships focused on mutual benefit, it offers an alternative model that resonates with many African leaders seeking autonomy in their economic decisions. The implications are profound. If successful, this new approach could reshape global financial systems by fostering greater inclusivity and responsiveness to developing countries' needs. However, achieving sustainable outcomes will require careful management of partnerships to ensure they do not lead to dependency or exploitation. As we move forward into this new era of international finance, the ability of BRICS and African nations to collaborate effectively will determine whether this moment marks a genuine shift towards equitable global economic governance or simply another chapter in the complex narrative of international relations. Russia's $20 billion debt write-off for African nations could signal a transformative shift in global finance, as BRICS rises to challenge traditional institutions. The future of African development hangs in the balance. Will this be a turning point for economic empowerment? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights on global affairs.